The Global Child Protection Working Group, the international coordinating body for protecting girls and boys in humanitarian settings, has produced a video series on the minimum standards for child protection in humanitarian action. These minimum standards, also known as the CPMS, were developed through widespread interagency collaboration. They are one of the companions to the Sphere standards. This video examines Standard 11, Children associated with armed forces or armed groups. For other installments in the series, please go to the CPWG's website. Around the world, boys and girls are recruited and used by armed forces or groups as combatants, spies, porters, informants, or for sexual purposes. This can have multiple and complex effects.
We're talking about things like physical injury and disability, sometimes long-lasting or even permanent. We're talking about the physical, psychological effects of rape and other forms of sexual violence with girls and boys, children born of rape and the needs that those children will have, about long-term family separation, access to education being interrupted for years on end, and great difficulty for many of these children in returning and reintegrating.
Our global standard states, boys and girls are protected from recruitment and use in hostilities by armed forces or armed groups and are released and provided with effective reintegration services.
The standard on children associated with armed forces and armed groups has already become an integral part of what we call the protection toolbox in the organization that I work within. We use it to inform our work in terms of dialogue with parties to armed conflict, be they armed forces or armed groups at local, regional, or national levels. And certainly we've integrated it into our training and capacity building for colleagues who work in field contexts.
Creating a broader awareness of rights, needs, and responsibilities at all levels has a positive effect on prevention of recruitment and related social change. Knowledge and understanding are catalysts for change. Families, local activists, community and military leaders can all make a difference if the legal and other arguments against children's participation in conflict are more widely known and understood.
You have to engage the communities, you have to engage the children themselves. They should know about the rights in order to fight for them.
And also the non-government organizations and the involvement of faith-based organizations and even youth groups are very important. In one of the projects that we did, it was already a youth group advocating with their peers that they have a right for protection.
Working with communities and developing messages together should be done early and often and can add value anytime. Information sharing empowers communities, and shifts in policy at a national level can result from and be reinforced by local awareness raising.
Although we have national laws which prevent the recruitment of children in armed groups, these are not really translated into action or not translated into legislation at the municipal, city, or barangay level. So at that point, what we did was educating local leaders that their children have a right not to be recruited into these armed groups.
Prevention is a multi-layered process which needs adequate resourcing. It should draw in children and their families, as well as armed actors, local activists, communities, peacekeepers, donors, and governments themselves.
The minimum standard sets out a number of practical and sustainable measures that can be integrated into any strategy that's aimed at preventing the unlawful recruitment and use of children.
So, what can be done to prevent the recruitment and use of children in your context?
There has to be real alternatives for children. There has to be access to quality education. There has to be economic opportunity for children and families. There needs to be a full, holistic approach for prevention to root causes. We need to be able to address the injustices that children experience. They actually feel very strongly, very often, about the injustices that are experienced by their families and communities.
Ask children for their insights.
It's not just important to look at the reasons why they joined, But why don't we look at the other side? There are other children in the same community who refuse to join and maybe understand the reasons why these children have chosen not to join the armed groups.
The needs of children during the reintegration process differ owing to their age, experience, gender, and ability. You must develop a strength-based care plan to suit each boy and girl, their family's capacity, and resources available at the community level. These resources may have been altered by the conflict and continue to change. Efforts range across education, psychosocial support, livelihood opportunities, medical and legal services. Here's an example on economic reintegration.
Concretely, we would listen to the aspiration of the child and assess his or her capacities, whether he or she has already gone to school, has already acquired some skills, including in the armed forces and groups, whether he or she has a disability, and so on. Also taking into account the job opportunities that we have already identified in the labor market locally.
Services that improve the welfare and protection of returning girls and boys should be available to the full community of children. This ensures that the program response is holistic and not isolating or stigmatizing.
Because if we are giving just grants for these children, for example, or we have a different school for them, this is not good for their reintegration in their community, and it's not good for the other children and for the community because they will feel that it's better to have been in a group.
Reintegration isn't something that happens quickly. It takes support over the long term to prevent re-recruitment and to afford children the opportunities to realize their full potential.
You have to follow up on the reintegration process. No, you have to go back there to see how his relation is working with his family, with the community, how the community is receiving these children.
So how we address the response and prevention to that in the bigger picture requires both the strengthening of systems and the motivation of positive social norms that will, in the long run, both enable the child to return to the family and community and become an active participant of the community in a positive manner, but also to prevent re-recruitment, because the shift in social norms would value education and vocation above the recruitment and use.
To summarize, the CPMS reflect a consensus on program principles for the delivery of a quality child protection response in emergencies. Collectively, you can adapt their key actions, indicators, and guidance on prevention, release, and reintegration of girls and boys to fit your local context.
I invite all of you to go to the field with these plans, with the laws and everything, and have the opinions and the suggestions from the people in the field in order to make them better and in order that we really protect children to be engaged by armed groups.
Other installments in this series focus on how to use the CPMS and on the specific standards for addressing needs. The CPWG provides support for applying the standards, such as mainstreaming briefs, guidance on contextual adaptation, and training packages. For more information, please go to cpwg.net/minimum-standards.